Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Everything Dog Training. I'm John McGuigan, Glasgow dog trainer and behaviour consultant. So thanks for taking the time out of your day or your evening to listen to the conversation between Alex and I. We're going to cover some separation related issues in this podcast. It won't be a step-by-step instructional to how to resolve these issues. The purpose of this conversation is to give you an overview if your dog is suffering from these behaviours, and then how to seek further help. Now, the reason for that is that separation related behaviours or owner absent behaviours can be extremely complicated, and there could be a variety of underlying issues which we talk about in the conversation that we have. So if we're to try and give you a step-by-step instruction for this, it may not work with your dog because there needs to be some further investigation as to why your dog is showing these behaviours. But it's certainly an interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. Alex is an excellent trainer, She's, and if you follow her on, it's at Wolfgang's Way Dog Training. I'll put the links in the show notes to her socials, and she's got lots of really nice really nice social media content, so you can follow her there. Now, as you're listening to this conversation, even if your dog isn't showing separation related behaviours, what I would like you to do is see if you can take some of the concepts and principles that we're talking about. So I talk about concepts and principles a lot, and see if we can apply them to our dog or to your dog, and so that there'll be universal concepts and principles that we discuss through this conversation, and they can be applied to give you your dog. And to give you an example of that, I worked with a dog today. It was a remote session. We did the dog owner or guardian was in Ireland, and her dog is showing some pain related. The dog's in pain. Okay, he's hurt his back, and so we had to adapt what we were doing in order to accommodate the dog's injury. And I showed her what to look for when she was doing some training, and to do some, one, to try and keep him mentally active while he's sore because he's not getting out as much, and two, in order for them to learn to communicate with each other better. Now, I had never done anything as specific as that before, and I said this to the client, but I was able to take the principles and concepts and underlying foundational knowledge that I have built over the last 17 odd years now, and apply it to her dog, and we got some really lovely results, and it clarified a lot of things for her. So as I said, just listening to this conversation and try and take elements of it, and you could apply them to your dog's recall, them jumping up, them lunging and barking at other dogs, or whatever problems that you're having, or in your daily life. Okay, so there's lots of really nice stuff in there. The feedback I'm getting from you is good, so thank you for that. Those have taken time to email me. If you're wanting some stuff to talk about, or you're wanting us to talk about different topics, please let us know. You can get me info@glasgowdogtrainer.co.uk, or you can get me through my socials, which are at Glasgow Dog Trainer on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. We'll develop this podcast, we'll see where it goes. Okay, we've got this style of interviews that we're doing, we've got me discussing a topic on my own, and we've also got I've got some other ideas in line, and we'll see what happens with them. Okay, so much love to you, and let's listen to the conversation. So thanks, Alex, for joining us today. Massive thanks for us. So I've been following your stuff. We met at WIF in 2018, maybe?
Yeah, something like this.
Yeah.
It's like
and your content, I've been following it. I mean, I share your stuff regularly anyway. It's really nice stuff. So we've got a few things to talk about. So you were in London, but you're now in Malmö?
I am in the south of Sweden.
Okay. So what have you noticed from moving from the UK to Sweden, culturally with dogs?
So, I mean, culturally, it's quite similar in a place like Malmö. I guess there's differences between cities and more countryside, the same like in England, right?
Just remember, I'm not in England.
Oh yeah, sorry. Forgive me.
All
Okay,
right.
anyway, so the positive reinforcement side here is big in Malmo, which is great. I mean, I've definitely seen a few who don't quite go along those lines, but I think you kind of come across them anywhere and everywhere. It's a super dog-friendly city. I think Swedish people are incredibly accepting of let a dog be a dog a little bit more, I find, than what I experienced in London. And that's super great, I think. Like a dog might just bark sometimes or might just react to another dog on the lead, and that's not the end of
Just
the
okay.
world,
Yeah.
right? It's, of course, it's much less people here and it's much less dogs, so it's a little less busy for them. But there's actually loads of places where you can take dogs, and most dogs you see out and about are super well behaved. I think there might just be, I might have just noticed a little bit more on lead reactivity, and I think this might be because most dogs here are intact.
Okay.
And I think kind of male dog versus male dog on lead can maybe, well, lead to a little bit more reactivity. That's what I'm used to in London. And also in general, from what I used to, where I lived in London, you go to Hampstead Heath and all these places, and there'd be so many parks where you can take dogs off lead, and that's quite restricted here. So there's definitely some really beautiful dedicated areas right at the seaside, super nice. And you have a lot of those fenced in dog parks as well that
Okay.
I've come across a lot in America. It's not my favorite thing, I have to say. I would probably never take Wolfgang there. But it's definitely much more on lead here. And one other thing that I've definitely noticed is agility is huge.
Yeah.
So, everybody who has a dog will want to do a little bit of agility. You see like agility equipment in the big kind of open space parks,
Okay.
or even in those smaller fenced in dog parks, you see just a lot of agility opportunity. And that I think is actually really nice, that people are really into doing sports with their dogs, going camping with their dogs, going running with their dogs and stuff. So that's huge over here.
What's the population of Sweden?
In Sweden, the same like London, I think about 8-9 million in the whole country.
And it's a massive country as well. It's huge.
A long country, yes.
Yeah. So do you think that so given that you've got such a, because it's area wise it's probably on a par with the UK, yeah?
Yeah,
Maybe a little bit less.
so you have, well, so Malmö is the third biggest city in so you have Stockholm, then Gothenburg, and then Malmö. So, but it's like, well, I think around, I might be completely wrong, but I think it's around maybe 300,000, 350,000. I have to Google that, but it's fairly small. It's like a small Berlin. That's the vibe here.
I'm just wondering if you've got that size of country with only 8 million people in it, and the people spend more time outdoors anyway, just because that's what you do in Sweden.
Yeah, exactly. And Swedish people are so into their outdoors. So I mean, I was joking to a friend the other day that often when I do in-person training here, the human caregivers, the dog owners, whatever you want to call them, they come so prepared for any weather when we do outdoor training, in terms of like the trousers they wear and the layering and the shoes and everything else. And I'm kind of rocking up in my jogging bottoms and my trainers who are literally not made for any kind of water or anything. But yeah, they're really into their outdoor pursuits, which is really cool actually. And it's lovely for the dogs. It's so nice for the dogs.
Yeah, that's cool. What breeds have you seen differences breed wise, or what type of dogs people have where you are compared to where you were in the UK and London?
So again, this is around the kind of area I'm here at, right? So I think, or just outside of Malmo, countryside, a lot of working Labradors, a lot, who are much smaller in stature than they are the Labradors you come across in London, or I've come across in kind of London and the UK. Gun dog training is huge outside of Malmo as well.
Yeah.
Maybe not the kind that I'm really into, but that's another discussion. a lot of people, so one surprise I've had here is that a lot of people in Malmö have much larger breeds than what they would have in London. So you see a lot of German Shepherds, you see a lot of Malinois, Rottweilers, and you do also see a lot of bull breeds, American bullies and stuff, a lot. You see a lot of, the kind of typical Nordic breeds, the Finnish Lapphunds, Valhunds, those kind of breeds are of course, much more popular. I think I've trained one Valhund when in my time in London, and maybe Lapphunds type thing. And one thing that's definitely increased since I've moved here, so being very much used to all of those poodle mixes in London. I mean, it kind of started with a Labradoodle or Cockapoo and went all the way to, I don't know, St. Bernards being mixed with poodles or stuff in England, right? When I moved here, maybe I saw like 1 or 2 Cockapoos, and now like 2-3 years down the line, they've become super popular. So mainly the kind of Cockapoo, Cavapoo, a lot of Australian Labradoodles as well. So they've become really popular over here.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
So most of the people I work here, I always ask, why did you get that dog? What are your kind of expectations? How much you know about the breed and the breed mix? And it's mostly because of the non-shedding.
Okay.
And the apparent hypoallergenic. Yeah, that's mostly the reason. And I think also a lot of people think, oh, yay, little curly whirly poodle mix, and not knowing that there's no little sweet curly noodle thingy anything. There's also a lot of poodles here, actually, of all sizes. So again, actually much more than I would have seen around London. So a lot.
I think as well, especially when you're crossing poodles with a working cocker, and you basically get a working cocker with a poodle coat, and that's what you get. And I like working cockers. I like working with them. They're fun to work with, but they're not an ideal pet because they require so much work,
Yeah, exactly. And I do think people, but even I think with a mini poodle, which seems to be a very popular breed over here, I know it's miniature size, but they're such Duracell bunnies.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize how much work and how much kind of enrichment and everything they need, really.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they'll come to terms with it.
And so, just for Malmo's on the bridge, isn't it?
Yes, just across.
And then do you work in Copenhagen as well?
Not currently, but I'd love to. I actually have I work with a lovely couple in Copenhagen on separation anxiety, but that's of course is all remote. But yeah, and I don't know, it's shameful. I've only been to Copenhagen a couple of times since. But it's such a cool place. It's just hugely expensive. Jesus. I mean, so anyway. Yeah, but I do cater to Copenhagen as well if I were to get clients there.
Okay. And you said there about, so moving into your separation anxiety work, tell us how you get in. So we'll talk about the ins and outs of it because it'll probably be the crux of what we're talking about. But tell us how you get into that. What made you specialize or diversify towards that?
So when I moved to Sweden, my little Wolfgang basically decided that she couldn't be home alone at all. So we drove over here, a little 24-hour trip from London. So through Brexit and COVID, kind of decided it was a good idea to take a little road trip. And when I arrived and kind of settling her in, different environment, different way of living and stuff, she was really struggling. And I've done some kind of, let's say, light separation anxiety courses before, and I read all the books and knew about behavior in general and stuff, but I was really struggling to help her overcome it. I think what came into it for her at that point was also some underlying medical issues. She was really having a bit of a bad tummy for a while when we moved over here. And I didn't even realize at that point how much that would play into her kind of separation. I mean, it was more like isolation distress. I kind of could leave her with someone else, but isolation distress kind of / separation anxiety, I guess. But yeah, and I just thought, and I spent a lot of time with her at home. I still did a lot of online work with all of my UK clients, and, you know, during COVID anyway, everything was a lot online. And then I just kind of also needed to find some sort of solution of being there for her. I didn't really find anybody I would leave her here with as well. I'm quite special when it comes to my own little girl in terms of like who to leave her with and stuff. So
You're allowed to be, though. You're allowed to be.
Right?
Yeah,
And she is, man, because she doesn't like people really.
yeah, no, I'm the same. Yep.
Oh, there you go. And so I read Julie Naismith's book before, and I listened to all of her podcasts and stuff, and then I kind of just decided it was the right time to do it, and it was the most amazing education. She is such a brilliant mentor. It was really eye-opening. It's very intense over, what was it, like 2.5, 3 months. It was super intense. I was quite nervous about kind of if I'm going to pass it in the end and stuff, but yeah, that's kind of what led me there. And also, I really I love the detective work you have to do with separation anxiety, because or separation related behaviors, finding out what is it isolation distress, hyper attachment, is it boredom or frustration, and then really kind of looking. I think my dog trainer background as well allowed me to look at the kind of take the more holistic approach, kind of looking at what else is coming into this separation related behavior, because of course, as you know as well, most behaviors stand alongside other behaviors, right? So I don't know, noise sensitivity coming into separation related behaviors. There's so many different things that come into it, and then really trying to figure out how to set up the best environment for the dog, but also really helping the person. So I'm from like a PR marketing background before I became a dog trainer. And I have to admit, towards the end of it, didn't quite enjoy working with people so much anymore. But since I've been doing the separation anxiety, I just you know, love being there for someone as well, and kind of supporting and just going, of course you can do it. And I think my German self, it lends itself as well to kind of make sure they do it. Just, you know, people kind of do make comments every now and then that, like, when they see a text from me, they're like, oh God, no, we forgot we have to do it, everything. So but I think yeah, I like to, you know, just making sure that separation anxiety is exhausting, right? If you have a dog with separation anxiety. And a lot of people, it's hard on them. And I like to give them the opportunity to kind of fall in love with their dog again, and to kind of, you know, get back to that bond, making their dog feel safe, understanding that their dog is having, well, akin to a panic attack every time they leave, understanding the world from their dog's perspective, and just really guiding them through it at a pace that they can both deal with.
So there's a few things there to try and expand on a little bit. You'd said we've got the overall umbrella of owner. So I remember Ian Dunbar talking about them, and this was when I first did. Ian was the first seminar I ever went to see, and he talked about owner absent behaviour, and that's how the umbrella term that he had. So when you're not there, I saw an ad, and it looks funny, and it might have been funny, but it had Frenchie, who you've maybe seen this video, and the owner comes back and all the stuffing's been ripped out, the cushions and all that kind of stuff, right? And the dog's sitting on the couch, you know, with this carnage going on. And the owner thought that the dog was distressed when they were leaving, but they set up the camera, and as soon as they left, the dog just had a party. The dog just now, it looks funny, and the dog may be enjoying themselves, but that could also be stress, couldn't it?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
even though he looks as if, oh, this, you know, kind of the zoomies, which is what it looked like. Zoomies is a stress behavior, although that it's if you're there with puppies, it's a relatively okay behavior for your dog to have the zoomies. Logan's 10 years old, still has zoomies. You know, if he comes in and you smell the fox outside, or it's been raining, God forbid, right? And he comes in and he'll zoom round and that's just getting rid of some of the feelings.
Yeah.
So you'd said a few things there. We've got owner absent behavior, separation anxiety. You'd said another couple of things as well.
Isolation distress,
Okay.
yeah.
So what's the what would be the difference between isolation distress and separation anxiety, for instance?
So isolation distress is really the most common one, and that's a dog who doesn't like to be on their own but can be left with someone else. Separation anxiety is generally dogs who don't like being separated from a specific individual, which is often they're not their human, which is that kind of hyper attachment that comes into it. And then you have the whole frustration, boredom, which can often look very similar, as you just said. And then what you could also call that kind of confinement or barrier frustration. And that leads also a lot to either dogs being behind gates inside a crate or just can't handle being behind the door. And so the first most important step for anyone would always be to figure out what it is. And that can sometimes be super tricky. But in most cases, I think at least kind of 70-80%, I would think it's probably, or maybe I shouldn't put a percentage on it because I haven't researched it, but most cases would be isolation distress, where you can leave the dog with someone else, but they just can't be alone at home.
Okay. So knowing from my own experience when I'm dealing with these issues, what would you say the single biggest hurdle is for the humans to try and resolve this? What's, if you're working with a client and you go through everything, what's the single biggest thing that they find most challenging to do?
I think that it takes so much time to be patient and to really work at the dog's pace, because I have this a lot where I talk to new clients and they're like, oh, and we've done the whole doors a ball, and then we went from 1 minute to 3 minutes to 7 minutes, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I mean, that's like in years for dogs type thing, right? And to really understand the importance of systematic desensitization and gradual exposure, and to really commit the time, I think. And of course, for a lot of people as well, and this is why I said it's so important to be there for the human as well, and to understand how much effort it takes, is because a lot of people aren't in a situation where they can just find a daycare. A lot of dogs aren't happy at the daycare, or where they can just find a dog sitter or a family or friend who can look after the dog, and they have to go to work. So I totally understand that's usually the first big hurdle. And then
so just expand on that a little bit. So that hurdle there, because that's usually what I identified as well, is that they are trying to work on the training protocol or the behavioural modification protocol, but still go around their lives at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's that disconnect that people find really challenging, eh?
Yeah, and because it is.
Yeah,
I mean, to be honest, I think understanding the kind of the dog guardians there is just as important. And I think also kind of having been through it myself, a person who will empathize as well, of course, but it can just be such a huge challenge.
Yeah.
Not everybody, more people now work from home since COVID, even after COVID now, right? But it is a huge challenge. And even if it's just that you have somebody there for daytime when you have to go to work, but what if you ran out of milk and you need to go to the corner shop and you can't, those kind of things. And people just think then, oh, it's okay, and I'll just leave the dog, I don't know, something to eat or something, and it'll be fine. And you would have made a certain progress within your training program, and then it kind of all falls back down because of that one incredibly panicky exposure to being home alone. And so I always, when I talk to potential new clients, I make it very clear what I need them to do during a training program. And of course, emergency situations can totally happen, and it's also not always the end of the world, by the way, but I'm just very clear in terms of managing expectations and what's needed from the person. And those who make the best progress are those who really commit to the training steps and really commit to the program altogether.
Yeah. I mean, I want my old sarcastic self comes out occasionally sometimes. So what I want to respond to that and say, can I really, the people that commit to stuff, but that's not necessarily kind to people that are trying their best, because people are, humans are just human. We've got our own stuff going on, and the dogs are part of our lives, but we've got all that other rich life going on as well. But the dogs won't look at us, you know.
Yeah, of course. I make it part of my program to help my clients to set up management so they can suspend absences that the dog can't deal with. So whatever country they're in, I help them look into opportunities to find dog sitters, dog walkers, whatever. So I always, you know, how can you plan your day or your week in a way that you can provide for your dog? So I try and do as much as I can to do that, because I know they won't succeed if that's not in place. But it's just, matter of fact, it kind of is what it is. You kind of have to do it, because specifically with separation related behaviors, I don't think a lot of people understand what the dog actually goes through. They just think, oh, he's just barking, you know, he wants attention, he's being annoying, when most dogs go through a full-blown panic attack.
Just can't cope with being left.
Yeah, you know, that's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking also for the people, and I understand how sometimes they're just like, but I just have to go. But matter of fact is, well, you can't, I'm sorry. But you know, this is why also, and I feel like people are a bit more open-minded to it now, is it's of course proven out that certain anti-anxiety medications alongside a separation related behavior program works really well, and you can actually often generate quicker results, and that's just important for the person. That's not drugging the dog so the dog can just be home alone, like kind of flying high. It's really just giving the dog's brain an opportunity to go, oh, okay, I can learn here a little bit. Yeah, we've still taken it super slow, but some dogs benefit from certain anti-anxiety medications for the duration of the program, sometimes even afterwards, depends, right? But to really just help along, I guess, with the learning process, because that's what it is. They're learning that it's okay to be home alone.
Yeah.
And, you know, we all need a little help now and then.
So looking there at, I think there's that common misperception. It's the same as in humans. It's getting better with humans teaching. If we look at it from a mental health model in humans, so we've got the two big ones, anxiety and depression, or and I know I'm being, if you're listening to this and you're having these issues, I know how challenging it can be. And we've got, so anxiety and depression, and then we've got these medicines which help up until fairly. I mean, we saw it with who was the British tennis player who needed the break last year. What's her name? She won Wimbledon a couple of years ago, didn't she?
I can't remember.
Right. So she needed a break, okay? And then the press were all saying that she just kind of needs to toughen up. And that, but see, if she'd pulled her hamstring, they wouldn't be saying she needed to toughen up. They needed to say she rest her body. So we've still got this disconnect between what's going on in your mind, and your mind's just part of your body. Your brain's just part of your body, and it can get broken. I'm not saying that people with, and you know, because I had depression for a long time, which I'll get into in a second. But I wasn't broken. I was just ill. You know, so the same as if you have a cancer or you have diabetes or something like this, there's just an illness in your body which you can recover from.
Yeah, and also not forgetting there is genetic predisposition to some anxiety. So, you know, it might not be that you've come across a certain something in your life and then you can't deal with it, but it's also that some people and also dogs have a genetic predisposition to be more anxious. But also, and a little bit of a sideline here, I think we should look at the medical support from all angles. So I don't always go straight away to anti-anxiety medication when I think there's actually an underlying, let's say, I don't know, gastrointestinal or musculoskeletal issue or something that comes into it, because that can also impact on feeling crap when left home alone, right? So all of that needs to be looked at, and it's always really beneficial to work alongside a vet or vet behaviorist for that. I've been working with one client for quite a while now who needed all of that support. She's a really sensitive dog. when her gastrointestinal system is a bit out of whack, she really can't cope. Otherwise, she's doing really well. She has some kind of hip dysplasia problems and stuff. So you really need to look at all of it in combination and see how can you best help that dog to succeed at the training.
Yeah. And it's a wonder that when we're so poor at this with ourselves, that we don't recognize it with our dogs.
Yeah.
You know, because everything that you've said there, so the whole the gut being your second brain, you know, if you're feeling, so if you feel bad, you don't eat well, and then you don't move well, and then you feel worse. And if your dog's got gut issues and they just feel bleh, and then because they're feeling that way, they're then more likely to, potentially more likely to be stressed at lots of things, including you leaving.
And also hormones come into it.
Yeah.
So, you know, and hormones in comparison, for example, and just because I'm in the age of my life, so a lot of women get prescribed antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication when really they're going through a perimenopause.
Yeah.
They're menopausal. So this is why I'm saying you always have to look at every aspect and not just kind of go, okay, I'm going to throw some anti-anxiety medication at it. It's really important to figure out if there are any other niggles that we need to take care of first, and then maybe the dog is actually fine to learn it's okay to be alone.
In the same way as I think there's that misconception as well, that when people think that you're drugging the dog, so the dog's either properly spaced out or the dog's a zombie, you know. But that doesn't happen with human medication for this stuff either, you know. So when I was on antidepressants and it helped get me on an even keel or actually felt better, then I had to do a whole bunch of work, which is the behavioural stuff that you're talking about, and then create new learning and my new thought patterns, blah, 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 and then weaned myself off the drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, of course, it can happen that a dog really reacts to a certain anti-anxiety medication, for example, and does seem a bit lethargic, in which case the dose needs to be adjusted. There are some dogs who do better on this kind of anti-anxiety medication, and some dogs who do better on the other. So it's with a lot of dogs, it's a little bit of like you need to test alongside what the vet thinks is best and works best, and you don't always right away find the right medication and the right dose.
Yeah.
And with that, also just to say that, and I remember actually Julie Naismith said that during one of our Zoom calls, if a dog changes personality a little bit on a specific medication, who are we to say that that's not their personality? Maybe we never quite knew their right personality because they were always really stressed or in pain or something. So for all you know, maybe your dog isn't kind of like hyperactive and jumping off the walls all the time. Maybe your dog was just in pain or stressed or anxious or something, and these medications are helping them, makes them a calmer dog. So there's that to look at as well. And I know that can be super overwhelming for a dog guardian, for sure. And this is why, you know, working with a professional who can kind of guide you through those decisions is so important to find the right balance for each dog, basically.
Yeah, okay. So very often what I'll see is people are looking for these kind of hacks in order to make these complicated issues more easy to tackle, okay? So people will message me and they'll say, my dog is lunging and barking at everybody in the street, and have you any tips or tricks to help with that? So you'll get these, or you'll see them on Facebook or on message boards and stuff like this. So what advice do you see which is poor advice and doesn't help, that is common for these issues?
So I think, and I'm just going to refer to people now finding that kind of advice on the internet rather than from
anything.
So I think the one big thing is that people just tell you to leave the dog to bark it out.
Okay.
The dog is just wanting attention. You coming back in will just reinforce it. As we all know by now, you can't reinforce an emotion. And you can't just leave the dog to bark it out, because that's just cruel. And also a dog who has anxieties and is just barking and asking for help, you're just going to make it worse every time. They're just going to get a bigger and bigger and bigger panic attack. So that's just not going to work. The other one, I just think it's just cruel is to just pop them in the crate. And now you see like so much marketing around these escape-proof crates. What the heck is that all about? Not even just separation anxiety, but anything else. If a dog wants to get out of a crate so badly that you need to make it escape-proof, there's something going wrong in the first place. And also with the crating, so I'm not totally against crating, as long as the dog loves the crate, goes in there on their own, you can leave the door open, they're happy, yeah? So here, for example, in Sweden, crating is actually illegal unless it's for certain sports or traveling in the car or being at the vets, yeah? But crating will not solve the problem, because an already anxious dog just being shoved in a crate is just going to make the dog even more anxious. So that's just never going to be a solution. Leaving the dog with food, you know, a dog who's anxious is not going to touch the food. So that's just, you know, or food dispensing toys, that's just not going to work. The kind of calming plugins and supplements maybe can work on some dogs who are a bit bored or frustrated or something, but they rarely work on their own. And there's also not, I don't think any kind of scientific kind of research behind it really that would prove that that would work. Then you have the beloved sneaking out of the back door. Like as if the dog, because then the dog is going to get an even more panic attack. Imagine, like, oh my God, what happened? I'm a big believer in letting a dog know what happens next, even away from separation related behavior work. Then the whole like, be alpha, don't allow the dog to sleep on your bed or on the sofa, ignore the dog when you come home, you know, like be strong, blah, blah, blah. That's of course complete. I'm not going to say the word right now because
it's all right, because it is bullshit.
Right, yeah, that myth has been very long time ago. And then also, so one thing is the whole, I think what a lot of people also read and then kind of get wrong is to really rush through the training steps and then really risking sensitizing the dog to it rather than desensitizing the dog to it. There is such a fine line. And I think there's just a lot of information out there which kind of goes, okay, if your dog is at 1 minute, you're ready to step to 10 minutes and so forth. And that's just, yeah.
So there's a couple of things there that I just want you to expand on. What's the difference between, so we talk a lot about desensitization, then we've got systematic desensitization. So explain. I'm also conscious, I know that lots of people might be listening to this looking for you to provide lots of steps about what to do, but we actually can't.
No.
It's we're trying to educate people as to what odor absent behavior or separation related behaviors are, so that they get a better understanding of what is going on with their dog, so that they can then seek further help.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just for people listening to this, so that they can get and I'll put that in at the intro for this as well. Desensitization and systematic desensitization. What are they?
Okay, so systematic desensitization, not that I can say the word. So think of gradual exposure, yeah? Really systematically following a system of, say, increasing by 5% or 10%. Yeah, really, really gradually. Whereas with desensitization, there's so many different variables to it, depending on the dog's situation, needs, what you desensitize them to, and so forth, right? With some dogs, you might, away from separation-related behaviors, can take bigger steps and stuff, whereas systematic desensitization, gradual exposure, is working with a system of increasing the previously scary trigger at a level that the dog can really easily handle. So the first exposure is at a level where the dog is pretty much like, yep, cool, okay, I don't know even what you're doing here. And then increasing it so systematically and gradually that the dog almost doesn't even notice the difference.
Yeah. So I'd gone through a process myself. I open bodies of water are the thing that I don't like, okay, because of sea monsters, right? Okay, because of sharks. And I actually sensitized myself to it in my early adulthood, because every time I saw a body of water, the sea or the ocean, that's all I would think about. And it got to the stage where sitting on the beach actually caused me that same ill feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I've sensitized myself to that. Yeah. Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
I then decided it's probably not the best place to do it. Okay. But I then decided in order to try and go over it, I would get back into the water. And the first time I got back into the ocean in 15 years was in Western Australia. Probably not the best place to do it. Right.
No.
Now, um, now I pushed myself into the water, okay, and then did a whole bunch of breathing exercises, but it was all I could think about. The difference with that and doing that with your dog is I volunteered myself to do it.
Yeah, and that's flooding, what you're just saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's flooding. And you can say, yeah, of course, I'm up for it. I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Whereas you can't ask the dog if they're up for it. And the
Yeah.
dog can't comprehend it in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was free to get out the water anytime and I could rationalize that every time I felt that, just breathe, slow down, relax your shoulders, soften your jaw, think about something else. Okay. You know, but I could work through that process, and to the best of our knowledge, we don't know that our dogs can do that, to the best of our knowledge yet.
Yeah, and you're talking about the kind of, as I said, extreme end of flooding here in terms of sensitizing, when you also have much more subtle levels where it can also go really wrong. So one example within separation-related behaviors is, for example, one of these pre-departure cues of taking the key. If you're trying to desensitize your dog to you taking the key and you go and grab that big bunch of jiggly, wiggly, loud, noisy keys, and your dog reacts every time and you keep going, like doesn't completely freak out, but it shows and you do it again and again and again, you're not going to desensitize the dog to it. You're going to sensitize the dog to it. So if you see that, so even with that, you need to take a baby step back. You just pretend like you're going towards the keys. You're putting your hand on top of the keys. No noise. I don't know. Make that big bunch of keys smaller. Make it less noisy. There's so many different ways. But yeah, there are so many shades of gray there. It's again, it can be quite overwhelming for any dog guardian who doesn't really know what they're doing. But yeah, what you just said, definitely, I would never in a million years do this to a dog.
I wouldn't do it with anybody else, but it's because I can volunteer for it.
Some people do that as kids, when it's not cool. So
it's barbaric is what it is. I mean, it's truly horrible throwing a kid in a pool, or just horrible rearing, husbandry, whatever you want to call it, parenting. Okay. What about one more thing before we move on. You were saying there about the 1 minute, the dog does 1 minute and they can now do 7 minutes. So that's kind of akin to saying I can lift 10 kilos, so I can now lift 70.
Yeah.
You have to do all the steps in between, eh?
Exactly. It's like starting your first driver lesson on the motorway type thing. Yeah, it's just not gonna happen. There are some cases surely where I work with, so sometimes puppies can come anxious and find it difficult to be home alone. If there is nothing medically wrong or anything and they're not predisposed to these kind of anxieties in a major way, you can usually make slightly bigger steps, but that's very rare.
Okay. And we would always be erring on the side of making it easy.
Yeah, totally.
Now, the objective is to get a relaxed dog. The objective isn't to get out for increasing times. Yeah,
exactly. And also, so some people who are like then really into the program and they want to train a few times a day and stuff and really pushing. And I always explain it's much better to do less, but the dog aces it every time and has a really good experience rather than pushing it too much. It's good to be on it and it's good to want to do it and want to work on it, but you have to work at the dog's pace. And if unsure, just stay on the side of safety and don't push it, because you destroy so much more with that one negative experience.
Yeah. Okay. What about getting a second dog for your dog?
Yeah, not such a good idea, I don't think. To be honest, I think most of the time it doesn't work because the dog's attachment is to the human and not the other dog. What then also often happens is that the second dog might get anxious as well because you know, he or she sees the anxiety of the other dog, or it might be that the second dog adds to anxiety because like barking at something randomly. So yeah, most of the time, unfortunately, I mean, you know, I would love for everyone to have 10 dogs if they can, but I don't think it works.
And we'll probably, because we're towards an hour, and I'll usually try and keep these interviews an hour or so. What can people do? This is one of the biggest things that I have, and I think it comes from a lot of our, I don't know whether it's Western culture or whether it's just human behavior, that we intervene when things go wrong. So if you look at most of the health model in the Western world is we wait and see until things go wrong, and then we start intervening and we deal with pathology. You know yourself that if the dogs that you see for a variety of issues that you're having, if you got them a year or 2 years ago, they wouldn't be anywhere near as bad as they are.
Yes and no. I do actually work with quite a lot of younger dogs who didn't have any experiences, and where there seems to be a lot of genetic predisposition as well. But yes, I agree. I mean, of course, people kind of think, oh, it's fine, I'm only popping out for 10 minutes and he's barking throughout, but it'll be all right. And then it'll be all right for half an hour. I mean, I've spoken to some people before where the dog was home alone for 4 hours barking all the way through, and the biggest concern was that the neighbors are complaining. And I get it that people, I know everybody loves their dogs, so I don't doubt that for 1 second, but there seems to be a general kind of acceptance that that's quite normal for a dog to do. When a frustrated or bored dog most of the time will stop barking after a while because they're a bit like, let me give that a go. Okay, nothing's happening, I'm going to go and have a snooze. And an anxious dog keeps going and going and going and going. And so there seems to be a lot of people who think that's quite okay. So yeah. And yes, if you would have started a year or so ago, then
it may have been better, you know.
Maybe.
Now, what can we do then if your dog is and I'll put this in quotes, a kind of normal dog, all right? What kind of things can we start doing to make sure that these issues don't develop?
From puppy or adult dog or
whatever.
I mean, that's a really big field, to be honest. Like, so from puppy, I would make and sorry, this is getting a bit loud here at the moment, but we're just having the worst rain. I don't know.
I can't hear it anyway, don't worry. It's
okay.
Not up.
Okay, because the world's coming to an end. Whoa. Okay, so from puppy, I would make home alone training part of your socialization efforts. Yeah. Literally play a bit of, you know, the baby thing, the peekaboo at the beginning, teaching them object permanence, you know, getting them used to certain cues. That means now you're stepping out of sight, but you're coming back. Now you're stepping outside, but you're coming back, you know, that kind of thing. So really getting a puppy used to it from day one. And then when it comes to any other dogs, I mean, I would always make sure before you leave a dog home alone for longer that, you know, that they've had enough physical exercise, the right physical exercise. Do not take your dog to the park, play an hour of fetching ball, and then bring the dog home and think the dog is going to be okay to just chill because the dog is going to be full of adrenaline and it's not going to play. Making sure the dog had mental enrichment, making sure the dog doesn't need the toilet, making, you know, some background music always is always good. A lot of dogs develop separation related behaviors because there was like a massive sound or something when they were home alone. And of course, background music may not completely rule that out, but it would definitely help. Again, always letting the dog know what happens next, having a verbal leaving cue, can't go wrong. And then I think another really important bit is to make sure, oh my God, it's literally raining into our room. Sorry, and to make sure that your dog is healthy. As I said, a lot of medical underlying niggles come into it, you know. Your dog might be getting older, losing his sight or hearing. That might all just get a bit scary being left home alone, you know. Their hip might be hurting, their pelvis might be hurting, their tummy might be upset, and so forth. So to keep an eye out for that as well. And of course, the most important part is learn to talk dog. Know what your dog's subtle stress signals are. You don't want it to escalate to barking and howling and whining. You need to know when your dog starts showing those really subtle stress signals, so you can be like, oh, okay, what's happening here? Does my dog need help?
Yeah. And that's a lot of time that's done with remote cameras, eh?
Pardon?
Remote cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know everybody thinks China is watching, but, you know, I'd rather have China watching than my dog freaking out at home.
The thing is, they're not particularly interested in me sitting in a flat in Glasgow with their dog, are they?
You never know.
I've not very trade world secrets, you know, not anymore. Right. Couple of things just before we finish up, just to expand. And the thing is, the more that we talk, the more I could ask you questions about this stuff. Okay. You said there about a verbal leaving cue and music. So we're looking at, I had a client today, they have a young dog, he's less than a year old, super excited around other dogs, super friendly, you know, he's glorious. And I said, there's a disconnect in your communication from what he's telling you that he wants and needs versus you having to put in some boundary to say that's not always appropriate, you know, running up to an old dog and jumping on their back or something like that. Now, the clearer that we are with anybody, the easier it is for us to communicate with them, eh? So when you said there about that verbal leaving cue, that kind of flies in the face of that more it's that false information of sneaking out the back door and all that. So we're letting the dog know we are leaving and we are coming back.
Yeah, and you're only leaving for as long as they can really easily handle.
Yeah.
So if that is only stepping up to your door or depressing the door handle, then that'll be it to begin with. But you're basically letting the dog know, I'm only doing as much as you can really easily handle. Most dogs won't throw a champagne party when you leave them home alone, fine, fair enough, but we want them to be happily relaxed and snoozing, right? Yeah. So, and I see that I find it works so well. It doesn't always have to be a verbal cue, by the way. It could also be an object that you hang up next to the door or something like this.
Yeah.
I find the less fuffing around with hanging stuff up, the better for most people. So choosing a really unique leaving cue, like for example, I say Auf Wiedersehen to my dog because I don't say it in my day-to-day here in Sweden, right? Yeah. And she knows that's just dedicated to her. And then it's also really important to really only say that when you are about to leave the dog for as long as the dog can handle. There's always going to be an emergency. So if your dog can only handle half an hour, but you have to run somewhere for an hour and you know your dog's going to struggle, but you can't do anything about it, do not use your verbal leaving cue. You want that verbal leaving cue to be super safe.
Yeah, okay.
So, and
that means you're coming back, and you're coming back when the dog's able to deal with, when the dog's comfortable with that.
Exactly. And for a lot of dogs to begin with, it means like, yay, beginning of a training session, Mommy's getting me totally bored about stepping to the door and sitting back down 10 times. Oh my God, so boring, but cool, okay, whatever. Yeah. So that's what you want the dog to think. You want them to have a really positive emotional association with what's about to happen. Nothing scary is about to happen. And if you can see any subtle stress signals building up, you stop.
Yeah. Okay. And there, just that brings us on to the last, when you were saying there about knowing your dog. So when I got Logan 8 years ago, 9 coming up now, I live on the main road, you know, so it's quiet after 5 o'clock at night, but during the day it's relatively busy. And I put on a dog TV on YouTube for him so that there was some background noise and stuff. And it took about 6 weeks before I realized he hated it, right? I mean, he hated it, right? Now, I like it quiet, okay? I like I'll put some music on if I'm doing the dishes, if I'm doing some housework or something. I occasionally listen to a podcast, but I like peace and quiet, you know, and I think he's the same. Now, whether that's because he lives with me or not, who knows, okay? But I would put the television on in the morning with the, dog TV on YouTube, and I would ask him to go into the living room, and he would turn around and I'm not going in there, it's too noisy, you know? And I tried turning it down, and he just didn't like it. So we've got these things. It's like speaking dog, and then knowing your dog itself. So I can speak, I can't speak German or Swedish, right? But I could learn how to speak Swedish or German, and we could still not communicate well.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm like that. It's just the words, you know.
Yeah.
And it's picking up on all the other things, facial expression, you know, the dog's reluctance to engage with you. So straight away with him, it's asking him, can you go into the living room? And he's like, no, I'm not going into the living room. And I then turned the music off, and within 2 days, asked him to go into the living room, and he got up and hopped up onto the couch, and I put his blanket over him and he went to sleep.
Yeah, and it's really just about listening in a little bit with our dogs and also with each other, kind of also giving options. You know, you turned it off, is he then okay with? But also giving options like, we all know classical music and reggae is scientifically proven to be calming. I have some dogs who do incredibly well on meditation music or white noise or something. There is this beautiful podcast on Spotify called The Sleepy Bookshelf. You know, Wolfgang does really well with that. So, you know,
It's called, what's it called? The Sleepy Bookshelf?
Bookshelf. It's this really beautiful female voice, like narrating Alice in Wonderland and stuff.
Okay.
It's super sweet. So nice. Actually, Swedish kind of baby music, kind of when you put your baby to sleep as well, it's like super sweet and kind of, you know, melodic. So there's a variety of different things that you can try, but yeah, listen to your dog and see what they're like. And this is what I mean also with this holistic approach, right? What environment does the dog prefer? Some dogs prefer it in the living room or in the bedroom, access all areas, or behind a gate or whatever. So let's see, what does your dog like? How can we make this perfect for your dog? So eventually maybe they will throw a champagne party, although they won't, but never mind. We could try.
Okay. So I'll put your details of your socials and stuff like that in the show notes, and I'll do it in the introduction as well so that people know where to find you if they need help. Do you have any other thoughts before we finish up?
No, not really.
That's a question I should have given you before in preparation.
No, I mean, you know, really just be kind and take your time and don't stress out and don't forget what is it I watched the other day? Oh yeah, Dr. Brian Hare in Inside the Mind of a Dog, or Inside the Dog's Mind or something it's called on Netflix, right? And he was talking about survival of the friendliest. And this is my new motto. I'm literally printing myself a t-shirt. And don't forget, that's what your dog is all about. Your dog is never going to want to be naughty or push your buttons or anything. Your dog has needs and desires like how we do. And just listen in and be kind and be gentle and friendly.
And that's interesting when you're saying there about that Darwin expression. Okay, he's talking about the ability to adapt, but we have corrupted and perverted it into something about being strong and fit and ruthless, and that's not what it means.
Yeah, exactly. And that's apparently not what survives as well. So
no, I know. Awesome. Okay, this has been wonderful. So I appreciate you spending your time. I hope it's you're not leaking so much. How's the floor? Is there water coming in?
Maybe a little bit, yes. I'm sitting in the beauty room here, so it's not like insulated or anything. And
it's nice and sunny.
But the biggest hailstorm just came down, and our whole terrace and everything on it just got completely drenched. But never mind.
Awesome. No, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay, it was really nice to see you, and thank you so much for the opportunity.